On June 6, 2024, the NCAA Rules Oversight Panel approved a move that allows colleges to put advertisements, commercial advertisements, on their football fields during games. Now, this affects all the division levels, 1, 2, and 3, and this really isn't something new. They're just taking the rules that used to apply to only neutral sites and bowl games and applying them to all regular season games. Obviously, during a bowl game that's sponsored, there's going to be advertisements everywhere. Neutral site games, kind of the same deal, so it kind of seemed inevitable that this would happen. And I think, given the current saga of college sports recently, this just, a lot of people's minds probably jumps to how this affects athlete compensation. And while this wasn't done with the direct, explicit intention of compensating athletes based off this one move, it is in response to a suit that was settled a couple weeks ago, an antitrust case against the NCAA, in which several cases were settled at once in this antitrust battle, and as a result, the NCAA is going to pay out $2.8 billion in damages to current and former athletes dating back to 2016. This is going to be paid over a 10-year period, and it's going to be paid by the various conferences withholding a certain percentage of their revenue going forward to compensate all these athletes for not being able to make money off of their talents because of the NCAA's unjust rules, which is currently up for debate right now as to whether those rules were really just or not. So before we talk about the whole athlete compensation thing, let's pause and think about where this whole ads on the field thing could backfire, because I think there's two big ways this may end up backfiring on universities. The biggest one being that the schools are already getting all kinds of private donations for their athletics programs. I mean, it's so-and-so field at so-and-so stadium on so-and-so drive. It's so-and-so tunnel to so-and-so locker room. There's all kinds of millions of dollars of private donations funneling in, at least into the Power 5 programs. That's an important distinction here. So the fact that commercial companies are now allowed to do that, like I said, money's money. It really doesn't, to me, in my mind, make that big of a difference. But I think universities better think about this thoroughly, because placing ads on your field or having commercial advertisements, commercial sponsors for your athletics, that could backfire in a big way. Because like I said, you already have this built-in infrastructure of millions of dollars of private donations. And a lot of large universities actually have private donations built into their operating budget. They rely on them to operate their university. And so what I think is the biggest way this could backfire is that you have a lot of people who see that, University X in the Big Ten, they have a progressive ad on their field. They can get commercial sponsorships. Why do they need my money? And so you're going to see this. It could be immediate. Either immediate or slow decline in private donations. On a very micro scale, I can think of a woodworking YouTuber by the name of Matthias Wandel, and he sells plans for a lot of the projects that he builds on his YouTube channel. And what he found is that the second he started accepting sponsorships from DeWalt and other tool manufacturers, is that he actually started to see a significant decline in sales for his plans, and it was pretty immediate. So what he hypothesized is that people really weren't interested in the plans, they just wanted to support him and his work. So when people started seeing that he was sponsored, they thought, he's got all these sponsorships, he doesn't need my money anymore. Or he doesn't need my help anymore. So that to me is a very serious thing that could happen. The other way this could sort of backfire, but I feel like the contracts are structured in a way to prevent this from happening, or they will be going ahead, is that imagine a university puts an advertisement on their field, say it's for progressive, and it's the broadcaster, say it's ESPN, they only have a deal to broadcast advertisements for State Farm. And it's we can't, because we have this deal with State Farm, we can't show progressive advertisements on our broadcast, and there could be this whole conflict where they can't broadcast their games. Or the media people could say that, you're already getting all the sponsorships that we would get for our broadcast. They're already, you've already made the deals with them to have ads in your stadium. So they're just we don't need to give you all this money in the media rights deal because you're already getting it from the advertisers. So that could potentially be another way this could backfire. But, college football is just like anything else. Anything that has any level of success that has a lot of eyeballs on it it's going to be monetized at some point. Mark Zuckerberg could only hold out for so long before he had to put ads on Facebook. College football is just the same deal. It's just gotten so big now that you have to find ways to monetize it in every single aspect because it's a business, right? And I think that's part of what the issue is that college sports is becoming more of a business and less about the game itself. I think that's always been my frustration with like the NBA. It just feels like they're such sellouts. I mean, the NBA players already come off as having like the lowest integrity of all the major sports. And the fact that you added this patch on the jerseys, you made the deals with all the sports gambling companies. It's just like, it's very obvious that the NBA is more about the money than the game itself. Now they're making steps to improve that, but I hate to see that happen more broadly to sports. The NFL has been able to find this good balance of making money, but also keeping the integrity of the game. Now, some of that is being content with who you are, where you are, and how much you're growing. Now, for the NFL, that's fine and dandy because they've just grown an unbelievable amount every year for the last several decades. Versus some of these other sports, I mean, it's very obvious that they're not satisfied with the level of income they're generating. That's why they're finding every way possible to monetize their game. Once again, not something as a fan that I find that attractive. Now, as I stated before, this whole ads on the field thing, I don't think it's that controversial. That was in response to this whole antitrust case that was brought against the NCAA. There was actually multiple. They settled all of those cases in one settlement, ended up in $2.8 billion in damages to be paid over 10 years to 14,000 former and current athletes. This settlement also allows universities to begin setting aside money to compensate athletes up to $21 million. Nobody has to. They just have the option to. So does that mean that, say, as soon as next year, athletes are going to start being paid directly by the university? I don't know. That might be something I cover more in a separate video. But the aspect of this I more want to focus on is how this is kind of unfair to the smaller schools because the settlement breaks down, like I said, withholding future revenue. The Power 5 conferences are going to be required to withhold 24% of future revenues. The next group, about 10%, and then FCS schools, about 13%, and then non-football D1 schools, about 12% of future revenues. I mean, for schools that don't have football, they almost have no measurable amount of revenue. They rely on private donations to fund about everything. And I'm sure that the coaches that they have, even at like their top sport, like basketball, are paid significantly below market average unless you're in maybe a conference like the Big East and you're at like UConn and you're Dan Hurley. Like, that would be the exception. But the majority of schools that are D1 that don't have football do not have the revenues to justify, I think, contributing any money to the settlement. Because in a world where college athletes are paid, they're not going to have the funds to compensate athletes because they don't even have the funds to compensate their own staff. So that I find a little bit ridiculous, but at the end of the day, I'm not an insider in all this. This is just me being an outsider speculating and providing my opinion. And the other part of this that's unfair is that the hearings that were on Capitol Hill and all the outcry from lawmakers, they have really been targeting the Power 5 conferences. To me, everyone else outside of that umbrella really is not making significant money at all. But the NCAA doesn't break it up like that. And I really think we should start thinking about it that way in this whole era of compensating athletes, because right now you're just blanketing it as college football or college sports when the vast majority of college sports don't produce any revenue at all. I think it's unfair to all athletes to assume that they're either through NIL deals or just direct compensation are going to be enriched by all this deregulating of college athletics. Now, the president of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, he said that had this trial gone to court, the result was likely to be financially devastating and unsustainable. I guess $2.8 billion is doable. I'm not sure what would have happened if any of these cases did go to trial. It's not like the NCAA was seeking out to hurt anybody. They were operating off their own precedent of the fact that the league was an amateur league. To me, I don't hold the NCAA in a negative light here. I think the sentiment culturally has changed. I don't think the NCAA should be held responsible for what the cultural norm was in the past. I know that's a frustrating thing to hear for athletes who played in the past and wish they could have been compensated. College sports has only been a huge thing more recently. And the NCAA, as a governing body, has just never really had to ask these kinds of questions before. And I get that it's tough, and they've made some really bad decisions in terms of not being on top of the whole NIL thing and all these other changes and legal challenges. They could have been more on the ball with that from the beginning, but I just don't hold them responsible for the cultural norm in the past. I get that there's legal precedent now to establish why the NCAA is considered a monopoly, why athletes should be paid, but for the sake of time and the topics I discussed in this video, we'll save the discussion around college athletes and compensation for another time. So, with that being said, I hope this was an interesting elaboration on this topic. Thank you for watching.